The overrated Democrat governor from the state of Kentucky, who used his father's last name to barely win an election in 2019 against a very unpopular incumbent, Matt Bevin, managed to win re-election in 2023 by 5 points against Trump-endorsed Daniel Cameron. However, now he wants to run for president in the 2028 election, or so people think. I believe that J.D. Vance would easily crush Andy Beshear in a presidential matchup heading into the 2028 election. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics. Hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this. Keep in mind that I am going to AmFest in Phoenix, Arizona as a special guest on December 19th through the 22nd. President Trump was just announced to be there. So if you guys are interested, I will be leaving a link in the description down below for you guys to be able to get discounted tickets using the coupon code FREEDOM25. We will now continue with the video. J.D. Vance is the frontrunner contender for the Republican nomination in 2028 for the presidency. Andy Beshear is a top name floated around by Electoral bros on X who are desperate for another Democrat victory. However, according to my own analysis, I actually believe that Andy Beshear would do significantly worse with African and Hispanic voters, similar to Kamala Harris, how he kind of hemorrhaged with those voters. Yes, he would somewhat stop the bleeding with some non-college type of voters, and not even that much. They would kind of still be similar to 2024's vote for Donald Trump. And if anything, he actually improves slightly on Kamala Harris with the college-educated demographic, but with certain comments that he made during the RNC, insinuating that J.D. Vance's family members should experience some form of type of assault that will not be described in this video, as well as the fact that he is actually opposed major anti-LGBTQ basically legislation in the state of Kentucky. This is really going to hurt his brand as a moderate at the national stage, and he was supporting Kamala Harris during the 2028 election or 2024 election, which is not a good look being a front runner in 2028. That is not a good sign that you were heavily in the bank for the previous candidate who ended up losing in landslide fashion. And not only that, governor popularity does not translate to national politics. We've seen that with Mitt Romney. He won the Massachusetts governorship in probably 2014, I believe it was, or 2010, somewhat easily, and then managed to lose the state by a lot of points in 2012. Governor Ron DeSantis won Florida by 20 points. Everyone thought he was the electoral candidate for the Republicans, and he could barely even get like 15% in the primary in Iowa and had to drop right out of the primaries after the state of Iowa. And so that was a absolute disaster. So governorship approval rating does not translate to national approval rating whatsoever. These elections are significantly lower turnout. If you were to look at the state of Kentucky in 2024, you actually see that Donald Trump ended up getting 1.3 million voters in the state of Kentucky. If you look at 2023, you see that Andy Beshear did not even crack 700,000 in the state of Kentucky. When you look at Kamala Harris, she actually got more votes than Andy Beshear in the state. So the fact that as a quote-unquote super popular governor, you're only cracking that much isn't really great. Now, would he get over 700,000 in the state of Kentucky? More than likely, and he'd probably beat Harris's raw vote total. But J.D. Vance, I still think would hold up pretty well in the state of Kentucky. If anything, he'd probably do slightly worse than this total than Trump, or do slightly better in the state than Donald Trump. Believe it or not, due to his Appalachian roots, Donald Trump won the state, give or take, in this election by 30.5%. We'll be going over all of the states as of right now. All of the states that are 0 to 1 point wins or till, 1 to 5 is lean, 5 to 10 is likely, and anything above 10 points is in the safe column for either party. Looking at Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska, including that first congressional district, are all going to be safe Republican. Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky will also be plus 10, guys. This will not be under 10 points. I cannot express how many times Andy Beshear will not make Kentucky competitive. Just like DeSantis in a presidential election would not win the state of Florida by 20 points. If anything, he'd probably win it by like 3-8 in a presidential election, more than likely, given his, electability track record and the way he is in the primaries and my own analysis. He'd probably on the lower end win Florida by 3, if not even like maybe 8. And that's if he gets lucky, to be honest with you. I don't even think he'd win Miami-Dade at the presidential level. When you look at some of these other states, you see states like Iowa would be a 13.3 percentage point win. Oh, by the way, he actually does slightly better here. 30.9% in the state of Kentucky. Donald Trump won it by 30.5, so a 0.4 percentage point improvement. Vance probably gets slightly more votes. Andy probably gets more votes than Kamala Harris in the state of Kentucky. Iowa, 13.3 percentage point win as of right now. It was roughly about the same margin. Vance does just slightly better in the state of Iowa as of right now in this hypothetical 2028 matchup. This is assuming that all political conditions are roughly about the same heading into 2028. Of course, this is subject to change. Looking at the state of Ohio, 11-point win in 2024. Right now, a 15.3 percentage point win in the state for J.D. Vance, winning it by over 15 points in this scenario. We also see in the state of Florida, 12.5 points. This is slight underperformance in the state of Florida. Andy Beshear probably gains in the outer parts of the panhandle, while Vance kind of makes it up in Miami-Dade. So very, very minimal changes in the state of Florida. Texas would actually get about a few points closer, just about 2 points closer. Andy Beshear probably does slightly better in these affluent college-educated areas, while Vance continues to improve along the southern border, maybe underperforms in some counties, but net gains in the southern border of Texas as of right now, leaving him with 215 electoral votes alongside the state of Alaska, which he actually does better than Trump in. And we actually go ahead and do that. Maine's second congressional district will also be safe, about a 15-point win there as of right now. The safe states for Andy Beshear: California, 22-point win, so outperforms Kamala Harris in the state. I think nationally he does better with some of these affluent college-educated types than Kamala Harris. You actually see, though, he underperforms in Oregon, which is very interesting. He does slightly worse than Oregon than Kamala Harris did, just about 0.4% worse. Washington, roughly give or take, it's about slightly worse, like half a point worse. Andy Beshear, yes, is appealing to some non-college voters and some college whites, but with minority groups, I actually think he do not very well with these kind of people at all, to the point where I think that he would just hemorrhage even more support with that voting bloc, which would stop him from getting pretty close. He does outperform Harris in the state of Colorado by 0.3%. We look at a state like Illinois. Harris won it by 10.8. We see in this scenario, he actually wins it by 13.1, and this kind of helps him show. You see here, he is actually doing, it's kind of interesting because Vance is doing better in like Indiana and Missouri. He even does better in like a West Virginia, believe it or not. He even outperforms in Arkansas, but in Illinois, you actually see that somebody like Andy Beshear does do a couple points better due to those affluent college white voters. Hawaii is interesting because I actually think that Andy Beshear would kind of tank with Asian voters. He only wins the state of Hawaii by 16 points in this matchup, so a huge underperformance from Kamala Harris. That'd be one of the most right-shifting states in the entire nation. It's been trending to the right for decades now, and that's what you would kind of see there. Looking at a place like Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, and District of Columbia, those will all be safe. Vermont, 30.9, a slight underperformance from Harris. We see Massachusetts, 28.2. That is actually an overperformance from Harris, and that's to do with that college white vote. A 23-point win in Maryland, actually a 5-point shift to the right due to the African-American vote kind of moving a little bit to the right as well. Delaware, a 13-point win. Colorado, Connecticut, 14. Rhode Island, 12. So very similar margins to this election, but would still be in that safe column. And the state of New York would be about 12.2%. So an a point over performance, roughly give or take a little bit, almost a point over performance in the state of New York for Andy Beshear compared to the last predecessor. Maine's first would obviously be in the safe Democrat column as of right now. And looking at all of these battleground states, that is effectively all of the states that would be in the safe column for either party. Looking at the likely states as of right now, we actually really don't have any likely states for JD Vance in this matchup except for the state of Nevada. 5.5 point win in the state. I mean, Trump just won the state by 3.1, and I think somebody like Vance is going to connect with Hispanic voters way better than Andy Beshear would at a national level, especially some of those typical Democrat kind of, historically Democrat Hispanic voters, and a lot of the Cubans moving to Las Vegas also going to make a huge impact. I think he would flip Clark County in this scenario. He actually would win the state of Nevada by about 5.5 points. That's definitely going to make an impact on this presidential election, giving Vance those 6 electoral college votes. We see New Jersey, a likely margin, 6.6%. So Andy actually does outperform Harris by just 0.7% in the state of New Jersey. But again, everything is subject to change. New Hampshire, on the other hand, is a few points more Democrat. The state of New Hampshire is very anti-incumbent. It always swings away from the incumbent party in recent decades. And so I would not be surprised to see the state of New Hampshire out of reach for JD Vance heading into the 2028 cycle. Maine at large, however, is slowly moving back to the right with the population becoming more non-college. It does shift about a point and change to the right there. So you do see that there's a shift in Maine and New Hampshire where Maine is going to start voting to the right of New Hampshire at some point in the near future. Virginia, another likely state on the map for Andy Beshear, just 5.1% as of right now. The state was a 5.8 percentage point win for Kamala Harris. Andy would probably do slightly worse in some African-American areas, maybe offsets it rurally in some other places, but a very similar win to Kamala Harris's in the state of Virginia. Looking at Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, a 5.7 percentage point win in that district. That district is just moving more left and left and left as time goes on. And we see here in the last election that it was roughly a 4.7 percentage point win, now 5.7. So about a point shift to the left. And we have the swing states for the election: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, New Mexico, and Arizona. With the bleeding of support for Hispanics for Andy Beshear, I actually have New Mexico as a 4.7 percentage point win for Andy Beshear. I don't think he'd hold up with Hispanic voters at all nationally. I think he'd only win them by about 4 points nationally, maybe 5 points. Harris won them by about 6 to 10, depending on the survey that you look at. And the state actually just reported new GOP net gaining in registration. If that continues, you're going to see a result like this pretty realistic in the state of New Mexico. The Hispanics will continue to move right while those college whites kind of move left. But overall, the state moves slowly and slowly into more swing state territory as time goes on. The state of Arizona will be in the lean Republican column. Somebody had a take about this. I forgot who it was, but they said that Arizona is kind of going to be how like New Hampshire moved a few points to the right from 2020 to 2024. 2024 to 2028, Arizona is going to be like a similar thing. Everybody pretty much thinks that Arizona will go Republican in the next election, which wouldn't really surprise me, to be honest with you, given those Hispanic trends we are seeing with the Republican Party. Vance does underperform about 2.5 points compared to Trump in the state of Arizona due to Maricopa, but would gain in some of those border counties in the state of Arizona and wins it pretty comfortably for somebody not being Donald Trump. Georgia is a 1.7 percentage point win. One of the swing states that will move to the left, you see that is roughly, give or take, a 0.5% underperformance from JD Vance compared to 2024. Those Atlanta suburbs have been moving very, very left, and that's actually what would probably happen in this scenario. More than likely, we'd be seeing those suburbs kind of moving very, very Democrat, while Vance kind of offsets those gains in the rural areas. So he'd start kind of maxing out in some of the rural areas areas. Some rural areas would move left, some would move more right. But overall, Vance would probably win the state by about 1.5 to 2 points. North Carolina is actually a 4.3 percentage point win, so he's actually doing really good in North Carolina. It's basically not even a swing state. This is about a point better this time around, almost a point better, 1.1 percentage points better. So the state of North Carolina becomes more Republican heavy as the years go by, and that leaves JD Vance with one more state to win 270 electoral college votes. The state of Pennsylvania, a 2.9 percentage point win, almost a 3-point win. Scott Presler was going there, registering voters in the state of Pennsylvania, a very working class state that used to traditionally vote more Democrat, but has now shifted in the Trump era. And somebody like a JD Vance, I think, would actually appeal to these kind of voters a lot more than somebody like Donald Trump himself even would. And that's why you have Pennsylvania at a 2.9 percentage point win for JD Vance. Michigan in this scenario, I think that Andy Beshear would tank with African-American voters. JD would kind of hold his ground with white working class. Some areas would move left, but Detroit would continue to move right. A couple areas do move Republican. Some of the rural Michigan areas move right. Some rural areas move left. But overall, a 3.3 percentage point win in the state of Michigan, being the most conservative out of the 3 Rust Belt states, and Wisconsin actually being in the lean Republican column at 3 points for JD Vance. He'd kind of reverse some trends in the wow areas. Maybe he reverts in some of these rural areas in the state of Wisconsin, but he would kind of make some gains in those wow counties in Milwaukee, Ozaukee, and whatnot. And the last state, Minnesota, a 3.9 percentage point shift. I mean, more than likely, I would see that Andy Beshear does lose some ground in Hennepin, but actually kind of gains in some of the rural areas. That's actually what I think would happen in Minnesota overall. Basically, no net change in the state as of right now. And so we see in the final electoral vote tally, JD Vance is winning this election, 312 electoral college votes to Andy Beshear's 226 electoral college votes. This is a long time away. There has not been a single presidential election where the map is identical to the previous election. And so the likelihood of this happening is very, very low. Either JD Vance would improve in the electoral college from Donald Trump, or would actually end up losing states from Donald Trump. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this, and I will see you guys in the next video.